polygamy and how it affects women. Polygamy is an ancient practice that has been existing for a long time, but how it affects women is something that is of great interest, because as studies have found that most women who are into this practice do experience depression, psychoticism, low self-esteem, and so many other negatives. So if women actually go through such negative experiences being in a polygamous marriage, why do women still indulge in it? Especially from the bad experiences of other women. But again, if polygamy was not a positive practice, why was it so prominent in the ancient times? Because this was the system of marriage in the ancient times. Hello everyone, welcome back to Breakage Barriers. My name is Blessing, aka Lady B. Before we continue this conversation, do consider to press that red button down there to subscribe, and alongside the bell beside it, here or there, to get notified whenever I upload new videos, so you can watch more of our videos. Thank you. I mean, our ancestors practiced this, and it was accommodated, it was permitted, it was the normative. So men who indulged in it must have gone into it for so many reasons, and some of the reasons are: some men indulge in it for reason of procreation. Probably the first wife could not procreate, and so they had to take on a second wife and a third and more. If we have to look into the Bible, the narrative of Sarah is one. Sarah was a woman who could not procreate. Abraham was kind of content and waiting on God. But when you go along with that story, you find that it was Sarah who asked her husband Abraham to go get another wife. Why? So they could both have a child to love. And aside this, from historical events, as in African historical events, I have come to find out that women in the ancient times actually were the ones who suggested and promoted polygamy for numerous reasons. Procreation is one aspect. Another aspect is sexual satisfaction. There are some men whose sexual drive is quite high, and so if they end up with one woman, the woman's level of sexual drive might not be the same with that of the man. Hence, the man has to go in search of more women. And this is usually the case even in the current era. Third, another reason is that probably the relationship between the husband and the wife might not be conducive. For that reason, you see the man stepping out of the marital home and indulging in extramarital affairs. Even up to today, some of the women would rather for the husband to go out there and cheat on them. They would prefer for the husband to bring in that woman, and then they can share the home together. Yes, some women do accept this as a preference. Again, how does this affect women? It affects women in these different reasons that I've mentioned, in that some women find that satisfaction of completeness, whereby where they have shortcomings, they prefer that the man gets another woman to be able to make up for that shortcomings, so that there can be peace in the house. But these women actually pay dearly for such decisions, because like in the case of Sarah, we could see the tensions that came about between Sarah and Hagar. Hagar, who happened to be the second wife of Abraham. And this, if we have to use this as a reference, we can see this even in most polygamous homes currently. You see tensions between the women, especially if they end up not liking themselves. Sometimes it actually gets to a toxic level whereby the home is so toxic that the women find it unbearable to live together. And that also boils down to the children's relationship, whereby you find this in-house fighting, and so it becomes really unhealthy. But for this to have been so prominently accepted in the ancient times, men, our ancestors, especially the men, must have had a really good time, and most likely must have been taught by their fathers who indulged in polygamous marriage how to handle and manage those women. And in some cases that I have personally seen, these women go through so much bad relationship within themselves that the relationships gets diabolic. Yes, whereby they start using voodoo or juju, as you might understand it to be, against themselves. And some women even go to the extent of being so diabolic against their stepchildren. Why? Because there's so much competition within those children. You see, these women want their own children to be more successful than the stepchildren. They want their own children to be more accepted by the husband. And this extends to inheritance as well. Women are the most negatively affected when it comes to polygamy because they are maltreated in such marriages. They often don't have choices. They are often economically disadvantaged because the man is the one that's got it all. The man can ditch them anytime he wants. When he gets tired of these women, he can always ask the women to leave, especially if the concubines or the other women gang up against one of the wives. A man's heart can easily be turned against the wife. Thereby the man can ask the wife to leave the house with her children. We've seen there are loads of cases currently, even in West Africa, still happening in polygamous settings. So women stand to lose greatly when it comes to polygamy. And as well, the children, it affects the children greatly, especially when the woman is highly economically disadvantaged. The man can just ask the woman to leave. We have seen even currently in some parts of West Africa where kings who indulge in polygamous marriage end up disliking one of the wives and then ask the wife to leave. And depending on the type of king the man is, the woman could just end up leaving without any compensation whatsoever from that kingdom. So women lose greatly when it comes to polygamy, except it happens to be a woman who is educated and can still stand the chance of building herself up even without the man. It gets worse for the woman. If the man happens to die before the women and the inheritance is not equally distributed, then the women and their children stand to lose greatly. Again, if the family members of the man are brought into focus, whereby the family members of the man struggle to get the inheritance, this could throw the women completely off guard economically. And we are not talking about just one woman here, we are talking about many women, which makes me to wonder, a man like King Solomon, After his death, I wonder what happened to the 300 wives or concubines that he had. What must have happened to them? They would have been highly economically disadvantaged. To make it worse, with the children, and it's usually the younger women or the younger wives that suffer most. Why? Because the older wife or the first wife in a polygamous setting, their children would have attained maturity. But for the younger wives, they usually have younger children, and if anything happens to the man, they stand to lose most. So polygamy, it's neither here or there, except a fair system is put in place for the protection of the wife while the man is alive and after the man leaves. I have seen such polygamous settings whereby when the man was alive, he made sure he had settled all his wives. So for example, all his wife, while he was alive, all his wife had properties to their name. His wives were scattered all over Nigeria, and some were living in diaspora, but they knew one another. I mean the wives, they knew one another. So in that case, when the man finally died, the wives had been settled, especially the younger wives, they had been settled. So there was no pandemonium after the man had died. So in that case, if polygamy is taken seriously and looked into methodologically, and there's a system of fairness or justice put in place, I think it might work, because it worked for our ancestors. That's how they lived, and to an extent, I believe it was successful. Because if you are to look at monogamy today, most of these experiences we list, like depression and low self-esteem, the women who indulge in monogamy, some of these women also go through psychoticism and depression and low self-esteem. They still go through it. So far, studies have shown that monogamy is not working for some, but for the men who choose to be faithful to their wives, and for the women who choose to be faithful to their husband, it is working beautifully. So again, with monogamy, for it to work, there must be some level of faithfulness, fairness, justice, love, consideration, compassion, empathy for one another, compromise. You know, there must be all of this for either one of the type of marriage to work, depending on everyone's desire and everyone's attributes. I think we are all different. There are some women till today, in fact till kingdom come, they still prefer to be in a polygamous marriage, because some of these women don't want to struggle economically. They find it very challenging. They would rather be under that umbrella of a man providing for them, meeting their needs. And there are some women, regardless whether they are economically advantaged or disadvantaged, they would never want to be in a polygamous relationship. They would rather have a man to themselves who will love them and care for them, and vice versa. So it just depends on individual preference. And another reason again that I found is that some men and women go into polygamous relationship because of companionship. These individuals just want that companionship of a larger community, whereby they feel part of a certain group of people. So that's just their own personal reasons why they prefer polygamy. Or some who don't want that then prefer monogamy. But overall, women are still the highly disadvantaged group when it comes to polygamy. It's the man that wins it all. He gets to have the sexual gratification, have the empowerment, have the number of children that he desires, and just enjoy all the pleasure of it all until things go wrong. Anyways, with this, I say thank you very much for watching. I'll get to see you in the next video. Take care now. Bye.